epitome of contemporary.
I believe the quality and the luxury is really to leave everything you can leave off.
It really isn't easy to dress well. I have my coffee here. Hello everybody, welcome back to my huge channel. Today I want to talk about JIl SANDER, one of my biggest muses and some of yours as well, I think. She is the queen of less, the queen of purism, of minimalism. So let's start with a short recap of JIl SANDER's land. She's a very shy and cautious person, kind of, and you cannot see her too often in the limelight. I think it would be interesting for all of us to know a little bit about her life and what made her design especially these things and these designs. So she was born in 1943, which was in the middle of World War II actually in Germany, and she was born in Hedwigenkoog, which is a super small town in the northern parts of Germany, very close to Denmark and Copenhagen, so maybe even there, you know, very close relationship. The Nordics of Germany usually tend to have a very different style than, for example, the southern parts in Bavaria and the middle and eastern parts. So I definitely saw here that she's from Hamburg. She was later on raised there. You definitely see the minimalistic and puristic touch that the Nordic people have here, that live like a little bit in the colder parts of Germany. As I said, she later on moved to Hamburg in a very young age, which is a beautiful city and very well known for its designers. Also Karl Lagerfeld, for example, comes from Hamburg. And she started to study textile engineering later on at the university in Krefeld, which still exists and is the oldest university for textile industry and textile engineering, and it's very popular, and people like Vivienne Westwood, as I said, Karl Lagerfeld, etc. come into this university and are still holding speeches. And yeah, as I said, it's a super cool university with a lot of knowledge. And then she had a university abroad in Los Angeles for a semester. After her semester in Los Angeles, she moved to New York and worked there. I do not know if it was an internship or a normal job, but she worked in New York City for women's magazines as McCall's. I do not know if it still exists, but she worked in some journalism jobs, and later on came back to Germany, where she still did 1 or 2 journalism related jobs, and then decided in the age of 24 to open her first ever store in Hamburg. So now it's 1967, JIl SANDER is 24 years old, a super young woman. I mean, if we think of all of us, what we are doing in the age of 24, it's definitely, I think, for the most of us, not just opening a store. She sold her car and she just went straight to the bank and wanted a credit for 200,000 Deutsche Mark. Which was back then a super high amount of money. I do not know how she got that credit actually, but she somehow did. So she, the bank already knew she has she's a high potential. Yeah, and she started to work in her boutique. JIl SANDER was producing her own textiles and designs and clothing, and in 1974, so 7 years later, she decided to also pick up some other designers that suit to her aesthetics, which were people like Sonia Rykiel or Thierry Mugler. And yeah, she was pretty successful with that, and her company even got bigger and bigger. Her main aim with her namesake brand was actually to produce clothing in the highest quality form possible, in the best design possible, for a minimal price. So she was never actually achieving, or had never had the aim to produce things that are extremely in the target of luxury consumers, but she realized, yeah, pretty soon that it is not possible to create her designs to such a low price. So she decided to produce a lower amount of clothing for a higher amount in price, because she couldn't handle it any other way. But originally she wasn't planning to create a luxury label actually. So in 1974 she kind of realized that she will not be able to improve her concept if she tries to be in a low price segment. So she was going on with the luxury segment, but still it was 1975. You know how your parents looked back then, so the whole fashion industry was wearing colorful clothes. There was a lot of opulence, a lot of gold, you know how the hair looked, so everything was like more and more, and there couldn't be enough colors in a single outfit, and this is like the exact opposite of what Jil Sander wants. So apparently she didn't gain a lot of attention and awareness towards her brand because nobody was interested in puristic and minimalistic forms, because everybody was running around in their very 70s and 80s Prince and Michael Jackson inspired glitter looks. So it wasn't very easy for her, and when we think about it, it's been 10 years and she hasn't been extremely successful with her brand, so it's very hard to keep on track for 10 years even though you see that you are not getting more successful. So I think when I think about us right now and myself also, you know, when I'm not successful for like 1 or 2 months when I do something, I think like I need to quit that. But she didn't quit, she continued because she was very convinced that the thing she was doing was the right thing and the world needed that. And yeah, actually that is exactly what happened afterwards. So even though she wasn't that successful in 1975 with her styles and designs and cuts, she created something called the onion look in 1976, which consists of a look where you pair a lot of different fabrics and items on each other. You know, the onion look, we still know it today, and that was pretty successful, and also businesswomen really liked it, because businesswomen in 1976 were very defined and restricted concerning the looks, and she created something totally new. I mean, we get a lot of businesswoman vibes also from her clothing, because it's very, like I said, a very reserved and kind of conservative look, because it contains just less. And yeah, she was pretty successful with the onion look and gained a little bit more awareness and attention, and started to with her first shows in Milan, because she was producing everything in Germany back then, and later on also in Italy. And in some interviews she also says like, yeah, I feel like half an Italian, because this is where I show my pieces, this is where I buy my fabrics, and yeah, I feel so close to the people there that I feel like I'm half an Italian, because they just know best what they're doing. In 1979 Jil decided to widen a little her product assortment and created her perfume, and we all know her Jil Sander Some perfume. I know it's not the easiest jus, but yeah, she's been very successful with that. So in 1979 she's getting with her cosmetics and fragrance, in 1981 also in the men's fragrance department stores, and she's very successful with that. She does it with the help of the cosmetics brand Lancaster, which was later bought by Coty. And I think, yeah, she did like in 1981, just in her first year, where she released the men's fragrance 15 million Deutsche Mark, which is like in euros, half of it, like, you know, like 7-8 million euros for a person, you know, like Jil Sander, who hasn't any awareness, you know, in an industry like cosmetics, where people like L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, Coty, Puig, etc. are. And she's turning into the number 4th brand in Germany, after fragrances like from Estee Lauder, etc., which is a super huge success. Nobody would have expected it to be that big. But that also gives her the opportunity to invest the money she gained from the fragrance and cosmetics industry with her own assortment and put it into her design and clothing line. So since she's been pretty successful with her fragrance and cosmetics line, she also decides to show her pieces on the runway in Milan. She used to only show them in Germany back then, but she decides that she needs a bigger audience now that she already has a lot more awareness. And it's still 1981, but in that year her clothing line already made like 20 million Deutsche Mark, again like 10 million euros, which is again a huge success for her. And yeah, she wants to go to Milan because she knows like this is the place where I produce my things. She produced a lot in Germany, but also in Milan. She bought her fabrics in Milan, which was back then the best place for fabrics, and still is. She's still producing everything in Italy, and which still is like the main reason why the prices of these single items are that high, the production cost. While starting to get a little more successful with her JIl SANDER line, she starts to also teach at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, Austria, where people like Karl Lagerfeld were teaching before her. And in 1989 she decides to turn her company into a stock company, and is one of the first people ever with a design house to go to the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. So we're coming now to the 1990s, where the fashion also kind of changed. Everything got a little more androgynous, a little more discreet and puristic. And JIl SANDER was still there, and she was just like 10 years ahead of her time with her puristic and minimalistic style. And yeah, of course she gained a lot of awareness and attention. Now the 90s are like her big time, where she really started to rise. I mean, she achieved before already enough, but and she turned to be so successful that there were slogans around like JIl SANDER is hot, Armani not. Which I think is pretty funny, because Armani was like the person of the Milan Fashion Week, and we see that the style and the vision of the people totally changed in the 90s, which I'm very happy about. And I mean, we still see now, because maybe we have this huge flashback of the 90s also, but we still see the traces and tracks of JIl SANDER still nowadays in like so many other designers, like Phoebe or Yohji Yamamoto. And yeah, the 90s were her big time, and yeah, many people in Asia really loved her designs. She had one of her first stores in Taipei, Tokyo, Hong Kong, where she was working with the very famous architect also back then, Michael Gabellini. And you can see that in her store design, you still see that it's very puristic and minimalistic, and she's also still having a thing for this quality and structure in design. Also in the architects she puts her stores in, for example. So in 1999, JIl SANDER suddenly decides to sell 75% of her equities to the huge Prada group, and she's still the chairman of the company, but she of course hasn't got that much to say anymore. And in 2000 she decides 5 months after selling to Prada to leave the company. Patrizio Bertelli, the Prada chef at that time, decides to get a new designer who's an ex-Gucci designer called Milan Jukmirovic. And yeah, he's not that successful, because he totally changed the design and turned JIl SANDER into a lot more commercial brand, which didn't make the huge fans of JIl SANDER and the consumers happy, because they immediately saw that there was a huge design change going on. So in 2003, when JIl SANDER realized, like, okay, this is not going a good way, and this is still my namesake brand, I should come back. So she's coming back and working with Milan together. They have 2 collections which were very successful again, and everybody saw, okay, this is the line and the design of JIl SANDER also in the designs began. It still wasn't enough to turn the JIl SANDER company into a profitable brand, so actually just 1 year later she again decides to leave the company. The reason for that is that she kind of feels like she still has a responsibility for the brand and the awareness and the design and the success of the brand that still is her name. I mean, it's pretty funny that she cannot use her own name, like for example in the Uniqlo collection we have right now at Uniqlo. Yeah, where it's just called J+, because she cannot use her own name, JIl SANDER. I don't think that is a huge problem for her, because she's been doing this in Japan and Asia for a longer time, now for 10 years. She had collaborations with Uniqlo. And I think the most important last step that the Prada group kind of had was the moment JIl SANDER personally left the company again in 2004, they realized that they couldn't continue their designs with Milan. So they chose in 2005 Raf Simons, who was very successful for the upcoming 7 years. He then left in 2012. Which he was very sad about. He was very successful, especially in men's and women's wear. So I think he was like the best decision and the best thing the Prada group ever did for the brand, because he wasn't just trying to impose his own designs and vision on the brand. You definitely could still see that he was using JIl SANDER's language while designing, and he just combined it with his own aesthetic, and he was very successful with that, and we still love his designs. You know, in my Prada video I also said like the blanket like coats he had, he also used that at Dior and also at JIl SANDER, for example. And I think choosing not to deny the designer before, you know, like for example Heidi does at Phoebe now, or I don't know, other examples for example that I do not have in my mind now, but I think it's important not to deny that this brand is a namesake brand of someone else who has a very prominent and succinct style of design and cuts and colors and everything, and you try to just not to impose your own visions on that, to bring it even further and make it even exponentially more successful with the combination of two visions and two designs. I think the Mayas are a little more crazy in that sense, that they are definitely more edgy and more daring when it comes to their designs. I do not think that Jil would have ever designed these cuts, for example, but I still think it suits very well, and I'm a big fan of the Mayas. I just love her puristic, minimalistic approach. She says things like a pure luxury is having less, which is something so future forward. She is, by the way, a person who never looks back, who's only looking to the future and who only cares about the future. She's not futuristic, as she says. She just says, I'm like the epitome of contemporary and what we are right now in our century as humans. You know, it's like, and that's, in my opinion, definitely what she is. And hearing something like pure luxury is having less, is showing less, is so progressive, in my opinion, because we just realized it, I don't know, me for example, just a few years ago, that having less, owning less, but in good quality is the most important thing. And she just knew that in her very young age, and she believed in that vision and lives it until today. She never wears any jewelry. The only jewelry kind of thing she owns is a silver colored Rolex watch. I mean, how cool is that? And another quote I read on another magazine, for example, the magazine, was that she was such extraordinary in her perspectivity that she couldn't even participate in trends. Her perspective was that strictly restricted concerning the minimalism and the puristic form and the quality that she couldn't even aim to participate in any trends. You know, it was like some kind of vision she had and she trusted in. And I mean, she knew this like 30 years before anybody else in the world believed in it. She wasn't successful with it because nobody trusted in her, but she believed in her vision, in the language and her designs and her cuts, because she says you do not need any opulence or anything outrageous when you can trust in your quality, in your cuts, in your forms and the things you show on the human body. It really isn't easy to dress well. Of course, this is again an issue of perspective, but if you think about it, it is easy if you follow her rules, but it isn't easy if you are influenced by trends and people's and opinions and everything. So I have a few quotes here that I really want to tell you because I think they are like mind-blowing and we should all know about these. As long as this woman is still alive, we should definitely still try to learn from her as much as possible. Another quote I love here is, "I do have strong convictions which evolved but never radically changed over time. I never tried to be provocative, but I never indulged in nostalgia either."
I think the fashion I'm always after is really a mix of trying to really design pieces who have a certain class, so you can really give to a person also like a posture. And on the other side, I love very much to really think also in fashion very future or forward without being futuristic. I really love the pure elements of fashion, and I really love also the way to express in the collection how you can really express the time where we are in today.
That's what I meant when I said that she doesn't look into the past. She doesn't like the past. She's only looking to the future without being futuristic, as she says. She's not a nostalgic person. I think that's what makes her modern. And another sentence which is very important for us women, I think, and for everybody else who feels talked to when JIl SANDER is talking, is I like femininity, not of the devout, but of the self-assured, cool and sophisticated kind. I don't want to say anything more because this is like all that needs to be said, I think. So I think in the 21st century it is all about this minimalistic, puristic, conservative, not in a classical manner, but in a kind of restrictive and fast forward manner, if that explains somehow. And yeah, this is why I love this woman, and I think she is, as I said, the woman that influenced me the most recently in the last 2 or 3 years. I of course do love a more conservative perspective on women's wear, such as Prada, for example. But JIl SANDER is like really the queen of less, and I do not even like that name she got, like the queen of less, because I do not even see her as a queen, more like a god. Yeah, it's like the god of less and not the queen of less. Yes, and I think she did so much for all of us, especially women. I know she's I am not talking a lot about menswear right now, but I think she changed a lot for the women, and I just love it, and I think we can all learn from her.